Alright. So, I don't actually know too much about the Godskins, other than the fact that they're friggin' gross. Destined Death, I have learned about. But I would like to learn how they work together. And Smotown makes some good stuff, so let's see. Let me know if the audio is weird, by the way. I've had to mess it around for a couple videos.
One resisted the dark, while the other resisted Destined Death. Despite the massive differences between Dark Souls and Elden Ring in terms of setting and influence, it's funny how we can still make similar parallels present in both. In both, we have a god, the head of an all-powerful dynasty, realising that the world is cyclical and that their position will one day be usurped by the turning of the wheel.
Yep.
In both cases, neither accepts this change, and as a result, they take dramatic action to halt the coming of a new age and rage against the natural course of things.
No, it's Godskin, and I'm pretty sure they're actually wearing skins for clothing. Human leather and whatnot, you know. It's kind of yucky.
In both cases, it stagnates the world around them, creating a world of unnatural immortal death, in an age that has lasted far longer than it should have. For Gwyn, it was the dark, and for Marika, it was Destined Death. By resisting the change that would come through her kin's preordained mortality, Marika would inadvertently bring great pain and destruction upon her own kind and ruin to the lands between. So hey there guys, it's Smotown here, and in this first Elden Ring video, we'll be reviewing the concept of Destined Death, as well as the first adherents to its power, the Godskin Faithful, and we will examine their defeat at the hands of Malekith. However, I will also show through evidence at their locations in-game that they are far from finished, and that they still commit atrocities on the lands between, including taking tithes of skin for their apparel, and seeking new ways to bring death to the gods. We will also review their gloom-eyed queen, the identity of whom I will speculate on later.
Yeah, I think
before
people
Ranni
think that
conspired to steal the Rune of Death, before Destined Death had been sealed away by Malekith, the Godskin movement existed to champion the death of the gods. Instead of brandishing black knives, these fanatics would wield the power of the Black Flame, which, by its very nature, would cause the death of any god that it engulfed. It is fair to say that at this time, before the sealing of death by Malekith, that the Black Flame was the very embodiment of Destined Death. But before we go any further, where does the Godskin God Hunt and the Gloam-Eyed Queen fit within the greater timeline? We know that this movement came far before...
Wait, so why do they have tails? Is it because they're related to the snakes? Okay, I could turn it down a little. Because I know in the last video they had the Godskin Apostles stretch out like the snakes, but I have been noticing the tail. Snakes.
For the Night of the Black Knives, for it is even before Malekith had sealed Destined Death within the Rune of Death. We are told this from the description that comes from the Godskin Apostle set, which reads the following. The Apostles once said to serve Destined Death are wielders of the god-slaying Black Flame. But after their defeat by Malekith, the Black Blade, the source of their power was sealed away. This firmly sets it before the Night of the Black Knives, making it the first conspiracy against the gods. Led by the Dusk-Eyed Queen and the Godskin nobles, this fanatical religious movement undertook a god hunt, a term coined by the Noble Presence Miracle, in the distant past before the present day. The description of the Noble Presence even tells us that this event was ancient, suggesting it was at least thousands of years ago.
Huh.
Backing up this time frame is Rogier's description of the Night of the Black Knives, which he describes as happening long ago, during the height of the Age of the Erdtree. So that was long ago, and the Godskin movement predates even this. This has a pretty important implication. It means that Queen Marika has been attempting to stave off Destined Death for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But what do we know about Destined Death and the Gloam-Eyed Queen, who led the Godskin's God Hunt? Well, we know that Destined Death at this stage manifested itself in the form of the god-slaying Black Flame. The description of the various Godslayer spells make this very clear. Melina describes Destined Death as death indiscriminate. Simply put, it is a power that, if released, means that anyone can die, including the gods. And
cool.
The term Destined seems to imply that this was the intended way of things. In the Night of the Black Knives, Godwyn and Ranni perceive half of Destined Death each, in the form of a half curse mark, one dying in body and one dying in soul. If we put these two curse marks together and make the Circle of Death, we see the true effect that Destined Death would have: complete death of body and soul. Instead, we see the results of a world without Destined Death: immortal gods and undying tarnished. The Gloam-Eyed Queen, according to the Black Flame ritual, was an Empyrean, chosen by the Fingers, and the Godslayer's greatsword tells us that she was able to channel the power of the Black Flame via the sword. To me, this means that Destined Death was supported by the Two Fingers at one point, as I read the Black Flame ritual to mean that the Gloam-Eyed Queen was actually chosen to channel the power of the Black Flame and Destined Death by the Two Fingers, and then, by extension, the Greater Will. But why? Why would the Greater Will support bringing death to Marika, their chosen vessel? It was the idea that I hinted at the beginning of the video, that this, again, like Dark Souls, is a world of cycles, and Destined Death is not evil, rather it is a force of natural change. We get evidence that the hierarchy of the world under the Greater Will has already changed hands before. Now, at this point, I'm going to discuss a point that I think a lot of people are going to bring up, that they believe that Destined Death is the force of another outer god, or is another outer god itself. I disagree with this. Of course, people are free to disagree with me. That is the nature of this game. It leaves a lot of things up for debate, but I'll explain why. Destined Death, to me, seems to be something that's supported by the Greater Wills. We first of all discussed the Black Flame ritual, which mentions the Fingers choosing an Empyrean. Secondly, we do actually have evidence that the Greater Will and the Fingers have actually usurped their own order before. They had the world of the dragons before, and their Elden lords and gods before were that of the dragons. The remembrance of the Dragon Lord tells us that Placidusax was once an Elden lord.
Placidusax? I remember every single way to pronounce this name. I love it. Yeah, honestly though, Placidusax is such a cool boss. Power of its namesake. The Dragon Lord, whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time, is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. Once his god was fled, the Lord continued to wait his... Yeah,
meaning that the god he was once consorted to was also the chosen vessel of the Greater Will, but then that was replaced and usurped by Marika and the Erd Tree order. This is why I don't agree that Destined Death is a force of another outer god, or is another outer god. I believe it is part of the plan of the Two Fingers and the Greater Will. Like I said, we have evidence from Placidusax that they have replaced their previous lords and orders before, and it doesn't seem too far of a stretch that they'd be willing to do it again.
History repeats itself.
The wording of the Black Flame ritual seems pretty close to the knuckle there, that it is really suggesting that they were supporting this Empyrean to bring Destined Death and the Black Flame to Marika and her order. Finally, we also get evidence that the Two Fingers are displeased with Marika from the finger reader that we find in the Fingers chamber. She tells us that essentially they are punishing Marika for going against their will and destroying the Elden Ring, which is of course a result of what happened on the Night of the Black Knives. This again suggests to me that the Fingers are capable of going against Marika, and while they punish her, they still respect her as their chosen vessel. But
that must have been a busy fucking day. A lot of shit happened.
To me, the description of the Black Flame ritual, as well as the evidence that they've replaced orders before, suggests that the Black Flame was part of the natural orders, and that the intended plan, initially by the Two Fingers at least, was that Marika would be replaced by the Gloam-Eyed Queen, an Empyrean, leading the Godskin Apostles and using the Black Flame. Regardless of whether I'm right or wrong, the Dusk-Eyed Queen was the one who led the Godskins on their god hunt, until she was defeated at the hands of Malekith. Now I'm going to cover a part that's an elephant in the room essentially, and I'm going to discuss the Gloam-Eyed Queen now. I do not believe that Ranni is the Dusk-Eyed Queen. While the term Gloam from the Gloam-Eyed Queen could relate to twilight and therefore hint towards Ranni's affinity to the night, I don't think this is quite precise enough. When we look at the language in Souls games, you have to be very precise with the language used. Both gloam and dusk, which are the interchangeable words used to describe her, to me references in fact the transition between night and day, rather than it being the straightforward night that Ranni is. This certainly isn't in line with Ranni, whose affinity, like I say, is with the night and the moon. To me, the dusk and twilight are connotations of the Gloam-Eyed Queen that are meant to symbolise the movement of change and transition between night and day. That she was an Empyrean meant to bring change to the established world order, to move the current age of Gold Grace into a new era of death. And in fact, when you use the mending rune of the Death Prince, and you get the age of the Duskborn ending, again that term dusk is used, representing the fact that I think the Gloam-Eyed Queen was a Lord or Empyrean of this new Dusk Age that you can bring about if you become the Elden Lord of the Duskborn. Finally, it's also not in line with Ranni in the fact that most of the spells and tools used by the Godskins and the followers of the Black Flame are faith-based, whereas Ranni is firmly rooted in intelligence-based tools. So again, just a gameplay and stat mechanic that really separates the fact that Ranni, to me, is not the Gloam-Eyed Queen. She's firmly situated within the night and the moon, and the dusk and the gloam is associated with death, as we see from the Duskborn ending. So to me, the Gloam-Eyed Queen is a completely different character who we have not seen yet. Also supporting this is the Remembrance of the Black Blade, which talks about the fact that Malekith defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen. There's no hint that Ranni was at all involved with a conflict with Malekith, why she'd even be part of the Order if she'd been, declared an enemy directly by Marika and Malekith is beyond me, so it obviously isn't her to me. Again, I believe the Gloam-Eyed Queen is someone unique to who we don't meet in the game, and is either dead or simply hiding after their defeat. She's absolutely ripe for a DLC character, so let's just cross our fingers on that one. So after the war with the Fire Giants and after the Fire Monk Order was established to keep the restricted flame in place, we know that the Gloam-Eyed Queen would rise and lead her Godskin god hunt against the gods, with some of the Fire Monks actually betraying the restricted flame duties and being seduced by the power of this new flame, the Black Flame, and therefore lending their power to the Godskin forces. When analysing the power that the Black Flame once had, it is useful to look at the Scouring Black Flame description, as it reads the following. The Black Flame could once slay gods, but when Malekith sealed Destined death, the true power of the Black Flame was lost. This shows that while the Godskins can still use the Black Flame, as they often do in their battles with us, it has lost its full power to destroy the gods.
That's a shame.
It's just a now dangerous flame that eats away at people. Let's take a moment to analyse the look of the apostles, the armaments, and the spells that they use in order to better understand this order. The very clothing of the Godskin apostles lay bare their ambitions. They wear hoods and robes formed from the flayed skin of their victims, as a symbol of their goal to flay and kill the gods themselves.
That's brutal.
The descriptions of their robes make it clear that this is actual skin, but what it doesn't make clear is whether or not it's made from the skin of actual gods, or if it's regular skin. My assumption is that it is regular skin, and it is merely symbolic and representing what...
Well, yeah, how would they be able to get a hold of a god's skin? Like, what god would they have killed to get I mean, I imagine if a god was, like, really big, they could have all cut it into different pieces. I imagine the skin from here would be really soft. That'd be nice for gloves. But anyways, that's an awful lot of skin they're wearing. You know? I don't know, I'm curious. That's true. That is very, very true, Sean. But he's very cursed, too. You'd think that maybe the death root would tarnish it a little, you know? I don't know, Bridges. Maybe they're just trying to be menacing. They're just like, oh, what's a name that can terrify people? Godskins. Yeah.
What they stand for. Death. I also think there is evidence that Godskins do skin regular humanoids, and I will later analyse this aspect when I look at the Godskin in the Volcano Manor prison town, who I believe to be allied with Rykard, and also when I look at the Godskin who's in the village of the Windmills, who I believe is using the village to collect a tithe of skin, but again, we'll get to that later. One of the most fascinating item descriptions in regards to the Godskin apostles for me is when we look at the item description of the Godskin swaddling cloth, and the description reads as follows. Sacred cloth of the Godskin apostles, made from supple skin sewn together. Successive attacks restore HP. The Gloam-Eyed Queen cradles newborn apostles swaddled in this cloth. Soon they will grow to become the death of the gods. This suggests a very personal relationship between the Gloam-Eyed Queen and the Godskins, and that she even raises them from birth somehow. So what are they? Are they human and they all just come into the care of the Gloam-Eyed Queen? What is going on here?
Who knows?
So let's get our speculation caps on here and have a little go at understanding this. So we know that...
Yeah, so I imagine that they are trying to return Destined death so that they can kill the gods. Yeah, for sure, Sean.
Albinaurics are created beings, and we know this from the description of the Albinauric blood clot, which reads, Albinaurics are life forms made by human hands. Thus...
Well, when I was fighting Yorm, the HP regain item was absolutely instrumental in me fighting him without the Storm Ruler. If I didn't have that, like, I know that's Dark Souls 3, but, like, if I did not have that, I would not have lasted 24 minutes against him. I wouldn't have. I just straight up wouldn't have. So it has its niche uses for very technical and weird things.
Many believe them to lead impure lives, untouched by the Erd Tree's grace. Now
Yeah,
let's
I
look at
know,
the way
Sean.
that Albinaurics appear, and I'm not talking about the second generation
I'm just saying
frog-looking
it's
ones,
a
but the
niche
regular shaped ones that we
use.
find in the village of the Albinaurics, the Volcano Manors, Prison Town dungeons, and the ones that we find in Ordina Liturgal Town. These are pale-skinned but otherwise regular-looking humans. This is until, of course, they lose their legs, as we see in the dungeon of Volcano Manor. But aside from that, they also bleed kind of white kind of blood. And again, this reminds us of the fact that these aren't natural beings of the Erd Tree, but in fact manifested creatures made by humans' hands, like clay. Now, to me, when I was analysing the appearance of the Godskin, they look very similar in appearance to the Albinauric, the pale skin and the kind of similar kind of facial features to me anyway. And it also makes me think back to the swaddling cloth description, which makes me think that the Gloam-Eyed Queen herself has raised them up, and maybe even created them. The Godskins, that is, much as humans would later create the Albinaurics. I'm not saying they're Albinaurics, but I'm saying that there's a similar process that was used to create both races, and that is just, of course, my mind. It's just a leap, but to me it explains both their appearance and how she's somehow raising each of them in the swaddling cloth from birth.
No, it's not.
It makes sense if she's in fact growing them rather than having to kidnap them or take them from places or whatever. I also think it's supported by the fact that Godskin are almost clay in colour and how malleable their form is, and again we'll look at that in a minute. Some apostles would exist long enough to grow in power and prestige to become the Godskin nobles, the leaders amongst their ranks, who are the bigger lads that you come across. The Godskin noble set reads the following. Nobles are the most ancient apostles who are said to have assimilated inhuman physiology, not unlike the Crucible, the Erd Tree in its primordial form. This of course refers to the fact that nobles seem to have a dragon tail attached.
Yeah.
This description harkens to the Crucible as an analogy. The concept of the Crucible is certainly a topic for its own video another day, but in short the Crucible was the primordial soup, where all life was once blended together in one. Likewise, nobles seem to have blended human and dragon physiology to enhance their power. It also makes sense given their aims, as the dragons themselves once warred against the gods, so it makes sense that people who are also against the gods would want to claim the power of the dragons who once were also set against the gods.
It's wild that the dragons
This could
lost
possibly explain the presence of the Godskin duo in Crumbling Fire Missoula. They could be there to claim the power of the dragons. However, it is likely that they are there just for the power of death to carry on their mission, or they could simply be in hiding with other exiles that find themselves there. Anyway, I don't find there being any problem with the Godskin duo being located in that location. Anyway, it makes sense for a number of reasons. But again, we'll get to the locations later on in the video. Let's carry on. How they assimilate inhuman physiology is of course open to interpretation. The analogy to the Crucible could suggest that they use some kind of metaphysical ability that reaches back into this primordial soup where all life forms were combined to bring part of something inhuman back into their own bodies. However, if I'm correct, it could be the fact that they are created beings and are a malleable life form, and they most likely have the ability to alter their own form. And in fact, we do see this in the stretchy ability of the Godskin of Apostles. So it's not a stretch to imagine that the very powerful and strongest and oldest of the Godskins have found a way to assimilate other creatures' body parts into their own bodies. We also get an insight into the relatively little known Godskin culture through the nobles, which is certainly something I would love to be a part of. Despite being a faction created for a single purpose, they actually are not above pride and hierarchy. The Godskin Stitcher reads, "The nobles possess skill with sword unmatched by any lowborn." So the use of the word lowborn suggests that nobles do believe themselves to be of a higher class, that their nobility is also symbolised by their power. Noble presence, which is the power that the Godskin nobles use when they kind of fire out their stomach and blast us backwards, appears to be a perversion of the wrath of the gods. If you know, you know, Dark Souls fans. and it is used in a mockery of the gods as a sign of nobility above the Godskin by turning the gods' own powers against them and making it a perverted Black Flame version. So despite the power of the Godskin, the Black Flame, and their master, the Gloam-Eyed Queen, they were ultimately defeated by Marika. Marika entrusted her shadow beast Malekith to defeat and seal Destined Death so it would not threaten her and her kin.
And look how that turned out.
Greatsword that he personally defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen and then sealed the Destined Death in the form of the Rune of Death that he now has on his own person. Once sealed, the god-slaying power of the Black Flame was lost, and while it would remain a powerful tool as we see in our fights where it kills you over and over again when you're trying to heal, it was now no longer a direct threat to the gods as its god-slaying ability had been removed. Leaderless and, to a degree, powerless, the Godskin were shattered and scattered to the dark places of the world. However, they have not rested since that defeat. As we see, they are still very much active in the lands between. So let's talk about the placement of some of these bosses.
Okay.
Although I am going to ignore the duo that is summoned by the Spirit Collar Snail, as this is clearly just the Spirit Collar Snail summoning long-dead Godskins in this instance. One of the more interesting instances of a Godskin appearing in the world is the Godskin Apostle who appears in the village of the Windmills, Dominula, that is on the Altus Plateau. He seems to illustrate the fact that the Godskins are in control of this creepy village and its people. In the area, you can see that women of the region are dancing and laughing and looking like they are having a great time. And by looking at the blue festive set that they drop, you can see that this is some kind of festival in the village for which the women play a central role. While on the surface this seems happy, anyone who's been in this village can tell you quickly that a quick vibe check in this village can tell you that something is not quite right.
Real
Firstly,
quick, yeah.
most of the women are completely insane for whatever reason,
Yeah.
and are armed to the teeth with butcher's implements.
Oh yeah, I know.
You
If
can
you
even see
attack one,
standing
they
with the
all
corpse
come after
of
you.
a male character whilst licking the blood off her blade. Really starting to get some strange vibes here.
Yeah.
And at the village entrance, most importantly, there is a spirit of a male that tells you that the music of the festival to him is synonymous with a ritualistic skinning of the men in town. And lo and behold, at the very top of the village is perched a Godskin Apostle with a Godskin peeler, ready to accept his
So
offerings
they peel the
of
skin for
To
him.
me, the story of the village that is being told is this. The Godskins have essentially got their claws into this village and ingrained it into the culture of the village that a festival takes place where they are to skin the men and offer the flesh as a tithe to the Godskins, who they must revere in some capacity. In short, they have established a fresh supply of skin donors for their robes. The next location I want to discuss is the Godskin noble found at the Bridge of Lunaria. Specifically, he's found on the bridge that leads to the Divine Tower of Lunaria.
Yeah.
He is essentially blocking or on the way to Ranni's true corpse.
Yeah.
I would posit that this noble has been drawn here by the power of death that takes the form of the curse mark that is found upon Ranni's flesh, in an attempt to claim new god-slaying powers, no doubt sensing the rune of death upon Ranni's corpse. The next location is one we mentioned before, the Godskin duo in Fire Missoula, amongst the dragons and the exiles. There are many reasons that they could be here. The most obvious is that they are probably drawn to the rune of death and are here to possibly try and claim it to get some more god-slaying abilities so they can continue their campaign against the gods. That's the most obvious one to me, but as I discussed, there are possible other ones, that they are here to assimilate more dragon physiology, or simply they are here with the other things that don't belong in the lands between mainland, other exiles and the beastmen, etc. Finally, we're going to touch on the one that is the most interesting to me personally and has inspired me for my next video that I want to do on Elden Ring. So, the Godskin noble found in the prison village underneath Volcano Manor.
Oh.
For those who haven't been there, I highly recommend that you do so, as this village is environmental storytelling at its absolute peak and is what From Software does the best, in my opinion. It reminds me of some of the locations in Bloodborne, and it really kind of goes above and beyond some of the other locations in Elden Ring, in my opinion, in such a small area with so much tight storytelling. We are never told exactly what the purpose of the village explicitly is, but we can draw pretty clear conclusions via the aims of Rykard himself, and the storytelling done by enemy placement, item placement, and the design of
Burn
the
the
area
heretics.
itself. Rykard is assimilating power. We know this from his adherents, the Recusants at the Volcano Manor, and he is doing this to rebel against the Erd Tree. He is slowly trying to build up power. However, he does this through pretty dark means, as you find out when you finally face him in Volcano Manor. In short, the prison village is Rykard's black site. This is
Can I just say that Rykard
face him
is
in
like
Volcano Manor.
such an amazing design. Whoever made Rykard, again, deserves a friggin' raise. What the heck? I friggin' love Rykard. When I first saw him, I was just like, when I first got to his like second stage, when you see his face like properly, at first I was like, what? But then the more I looked at him, the more I was like, I'm in love with this man. This man's crazy. 3 hours in Bloodborne before bouncing off. It was the longest I lasted in a From Software game till Elden Ring. Well, like I played and beat Dark Souls 3, and then I played Elden Ring. I haven't beaten it yet, but I will at some point. Nah, man. A race so they can get some help? Nah. Absolutely friggin' love it. I love that dark, gory, graphic shit. I love this kind of stuff. I was raised on this. This is what my art's all about whenever I have the time. I love this stuff. Oh, I'm not into eating, well, actually, I guess I am technically into eating corpses. I eat meat. Cool. Corpse devourer. That's what you guys can call me. This guy, oh god, I love this guy. Like, pulling the sword out of the snake's mouth. Yeah, well, you don't have to use it though, but it is funny.
In short, the prison village is Rykard's black site. This is where he experimented with life forms in order to obtain his greater power on his path to blasphemy. This is why the Iron Maidens can snatch and take you here. They are snatchers, and they are taking people to be imprisoned here as an...
Wait, so if you get captured by one of them, you get taken there? I never let myself... I tried not to get touched by any of the maidens. Can you get brought here by a maiden? No, just a specific one? Oh, what? Oh. Alright. I need to see this.
Another one of Rykard's test subjects. Bodies of failed subjects and expired prisoners are piled high in the village in big fires, but the less fortunate are those who find themselves in the aptly named guest house. These dark halls are filled with Albinarics who are tortured to an inhuman degree. But why? Why is Rykard torturing Albinarics?
The black dumplings,
especially since that is the main enemy you find within the actual guest house. Well, this goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Albinarics are man-made, and no doubt Rykard sees them as a clay that could be used to reshape flesh and mould new life. Rykard is utterly obsessed with obtaining a new, more powerful form to take on the Erdtree, as a research opportunity for life being moulded and changed is something he definitely couldn't pass up, which is why they are being tortured so ferociously here. However, again, this is all a video in itself, and it's definitely the one I want to tackle next.
Yeah, I would kill them all.
But more pertinent for this video is a location where we find the Albinaric mask. We find this on a torture table on a corpse, and the item description of the mask itself suggests that this is actually the skin of an Albinaric. It is actually a mask made from the actual face of an Albinaric, and in fact the description really goes quite close to the subject matter of this video, as it says, "It is a far cry from Godskin. This Albinaric hide mask is the product of malicious mockery." By the use of the description Godskin, and we know that there's a faction that very much likes skinning people. The cruelty behind this hand is clearly that of a...
Yo, Elden Bling goes hard, yo. Oh my god. Elden Bling goes so hard. So much harder than I thought. It's beautiful.
Godskin who tortured and skinned this young...
How do you think they smell? You think they smell horrible? Yeah, oh my gosh.
Second generation Albinaric, as a cruel, whimsical parody to their own Godskin suits. So we know before we even face the Godskin in this village that there is one present here. We get further evidence that the Godskin has been flaying people here in the prison village when you finish Raya's storyline, as she gives you Dedekar's woe, which reads as follows. Disturbing likeness of a woman whose skin was flayed. She smiles with a serene tenderness. Increases damage taken. It is said that this woman, named Dedeka, indulged in every form of adultery and wicked pleasure imaginable, giving birth to a myriad of grotesque children. Without going into too much detail about Raya's storyline, in her quest it is revealed she is born of a ritual between man, most likely Dedeka, the woman who was obviously the mother of Rhea, and Snake. This is no doubt a byproduct, as well as the other snake men we see around the village, of Rykard's experimentation with serpents, which would eventually result in his final form. It seems that after Dedeka was used up in these experiments, she was left to the mercy of Rykard's ally, the Godskin noble, who flayed her. Again, I'm making a leap that it was the Godskin noble who flayed Dedeka. However, again, where we find this item in the Volcano Manor, the fact there's a Godskin nearby, and the fact in-game there's really only one faction that does skinning of this degree and flaying. So to me, it's a logical step to take that Dedeka, once she was used up in the Snake Man experimentation, she was left to the Godskin noble, who again flayed her skin, much like he did the Albinauric we found. That's all well and good, but why is the Godskin noble here, and why is he allied to Rykard of all people? Well, to me it makes perfect sense. Both have the same objective, to bring down the Erd Tree and the gods within. I believe the Godskin helped Rykard in this horrific experimentation for mutual benefit, no doubt using the Godskin noble's knowledge of changing form and incorporating inhuman elements into the body, which is what obviously Rykard wants to do and does end up doing. This is ultimately great for the Godskin, for not only is he helping Rykard become a weapon to bring death to the gods themselves, which is his aim, but he also has a fresh supply of skin in the form of the prisoners of Prison Town.
Yeah.
And by the bodies we can judge there is a lot of prisoners there, so that is plenty of bed sheets, robes, and curtains for the Godskin noble. This is why the Godskin have gripped me so much. Not only is there...
It's just a textile factory. I get it now. It's like in RimWorld when you play a cannibal psychopath colony, and everything around you, like the cozy chairs and all that, it's all made of human leather. The pet beds, your clothing, gives you a plus. I don't remember exactly how much, but you know, it's good stuff. Good stuff. I've got to play RimWorld again at some point and do a cannibal colony. Cannibal, psychopath, transhumanist colony. It's so fun. So fun. So much food. I'm just saying.
Their design awesome and their armor awesome, but also because of the environmental and placement storytelling that's done with them. For the most part, From Software has placed them extremely intelligently.
Yeah.
Some of the other bosses I certainly can't say that for, but for the Godskins, I feel like where they are placed tells a story. Like the story I told about the Windmill Village. How often else do you see stories like that in games that are told simply by the placement and the acting done by the NPCs in the area? Similarly, the menace of the Volcano Manor prison town, as it unfolds, as you find the bodies, as you find the body of the Albinaurics, and then you find the Godskin himself. My jaw was just hitting the floor at the storytelling that's done in that area. It's fantastic. You see all the dead bodies, you find the guest house, quote unquote, you find the skinned Albinauric, and it all just comes together when you fight the Godskin noble himself, and it makes perfect sense that he's there. He's not just a random boss there. He has a story to play. He allied with Rykard, and that's all told indirectly, and it's fantastic to me. And it was through all these little story bits when I was playing through the game that this was the kind of aspect that gripped me the most, just because of the way it's done. It's an incredibly intelligent work by From Software. You have to give them props for that. But anyway, before I go on a big rant about how well done this story is done, I will end the video there, because I think I've said all I can say on the Godskins. There's more to say about Destined Death in regards to the fact that it would receive a new champion in the future, and that this attempt to bring Destined Death would be botched and incomplete and would give rise to those who live in death. But that, my friends, is a story for another time.
Hell yeah.
And I will cover it in another video. So I hope you liked this lore video. I really didn't intend for it to be this long, but as you can see, tiny little faction like Godskin has a hell of a lot of lore. So again,
yeah, they do.
Well done, From Software. If you like this video, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe, as I'm obviously going to be covering Elden Ring content. My channel was originally built on Dark Souls content, and it's good to find another game to get my teeth into. But let me know your theories. I know there'll be things in here that people would disagree with, and I'm really open for that. I'd love being, pointing out things that I missed, and, this game is open to interpretation, and that's the great thing about it. So please let me know your thoughts below, but until next time, guys, I will see you at the foot of the Erd Tree. Take care.
Yeah, no, that was great. I learned an awful lot in that. All these lore videos are just shoving so much knowledge into my brain that it's gonna severely change how I play Elden Ring next. I'm so stoked. Honestly, I didn't understand a single damn thing about the Godskins before today, for the most part. It's cool to get a little history lesson. Are the Godskins even the same species as far as we know? It really may be no different to... Well, I don't know. I mean, when we wear leather, we're not really wearing people leather, you know? I don't know. I feel like it's a little different for us. We usually are wearing cow leather, generally. Are you sure about that, Bigford? I mean, if you're wearing human leather, I need a little bit more information from you. Don't worry, I'm not gonna report you or anything. You know? Giving me big licks. Like, why do people need to be buried in cemeteries? People don't need to be buried in cemeteries. Are we any different than cows to them? Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know. I don't have a whole lot in the way of leather clothing. I have leather boots. I've got a leather bag. But I don't have leather clothing. I should fix that. I should get like some real leather pants and a real leather shirt. Like a sleeveless leather shirt. I can wear another, like a cloth shirt underneath. As long as they blow me up? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I want to do with my body. Throw me in a bog somewhere and let the creatures eat me? Maybe record it? That would be cool. Oh my gosh. Can I do that? I would love to have my body thrown into some sort of bog and have a video recording of creatures devouring me until I'm gone. Kind of like what they do with those whale falls, where they record deep sea creatures eating them, like where they'll drop animals down and record creatures eating them. So cool. I think we need to be buried in cemetery. Yeah, but no, but then there's like cremation and shit like that. And you can technically apply for a Viking funeral as well. Like, cemeteries are completely unnecessary. They'll end up as oil eventually. Whatever, I don't give a shit, I'm dead. I don't give a fuck what happens if I'm dead. Nothing matters when I'm dead. Not a single damn thing matters when I'm dead. I don't know, the way I look at death, if I die tomorrow, who cares? Then I'm dead. Okay. That's it. People get so sentimental about that shit. Everybody dies. Some people die sooner than others. Yeah, I don't care. If I turn into oil for something in a million years, whatever, I don't care. I'll only permit ladies to eat my corpse. I mean, I'm sure there's a few out there. Because if you don't force people to do it, there's somebody who's gonna let their ex-wife rot in a corner of their backyard. Yeah, that shit already happens. That shit already happens. Sometimes people pass away in their homes or apartments and nobody finds them until somebody smells them months later. You know? Like, that just already happens. It's not, like... It's not something that you can just force to happen as soon as people die, you know? Yeah, your body could be turned... You could be fuel for mushrooms, yeah, for sure. Oh, you could... Oh, that would be sick, Cirrus. I would love that. I don't want to end up at the body farm. I don't want to help perpetuate bad forensic science. Dude, I don't care what happens to me when I'm dead. I don't care. String me up in the streets. Corpse mushroom for someone's coffee? Yo, guaranteed there's somebody out there that would want that. That would be really funny. You want to give yours? Yeah, you do whatever you want with your body. Skin me and wear me as a suit. Call yourself a Godskin apostle.